presenting the En-ROADS Climate Workshop to all of you. And it is intended to be an interactive event. So there's a handout sitting on the first seat up here. So if you don't have one, please go ahead and help yourself to those. Here, I'm going to do this. And before we get started, I want to thank the Nevada County Democrats for hosting. This media center is just fabulous. I can't imagine the amount of work that went into creating this facility. Ramona has been instrumental in that. It's just wonderful for the community. And because of the format of this first Tuesday event, we're able to bring many different groups together. And so I'd like to acknowledge some of the people that might not normally be here. And so I'd like you to introduce your group and kind of give a quick summary of the work you're doing. So we'll start off with Eric Jorgensen. It's interactive. Okay, thank you. Ariel, I'd like to introduce Ariel Lovett. We've been working with her at the county. And if you could just say briefly what your role is there and what... All right, and lastly, Dave Whitehead, if you would introduce yourself and maybe say a word about Citizens Climate Lobby.
Thanks, Lori. I'm David Whitehead. I'm a group leader for Citizens Climate Lobby, and we are primarily a nationwide educational and lobbying nonprofit organization. We have hundreds of thousands of members throughout the country and internationally. And as I said, I'm the group leader for the Nevada County Citizens Climate Lobby chapter. And everyone here is welcome to attend and be a part of Citizens Climate Lobby. We meet at the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Mountains on the third Monday of every month. And it's a very nice meeting, and we have the pertinent and current climate topics that we go over, and we discuss ways of taking action in our local community on climate. For instance, coming up here, we're going to be in the Constitution Day Parade of the Nevada City Float, and we have a lot of really energized people like Shannon here who's going to be there, and Carol, and Lori, and probably a few other people who are here that I haven't mentioned, but it's really fun. Who would know? Who knew that climate could be fun?
Yeah.
I welcome you all. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much.
7 p.m. Thank you.
Okay. So with that, with those introductions, I'd like to introduce you to En-ROADS. It's an energy rapid overview and decision support program that we'll be looking through and using. collectively. It's a tool that was developed by the Climate Interactive, which is a nonprofit think tank in conjunction with MIT Sloan School of Management, and under their sustainability initiative. And Professor Sturman says, research shows, and he's a professor, so he should know, that showing people research just doesn't work. So what are we going to do? We're going to be interactive and make our own discoveries. And that's what we're planning to do this evening. So this is a screenshot of En-ROADS, which we will be getting into in a couple minutes. How many people here are, this is their first climate workshop? Okay, great. So we're going to be covering some of the science behind climate just very briefly. We're just going to kind of roll through it. If you want me to, if you have any questions during that part of it, let me know prior to jumping into En-ROADS. So, excuse me, we've been struck with that cough. So, En-ROADS is powered by the best available research on climate science and solutions. It's transparent. All the equations and model assumptions are open source. There's over 16,000 equations under the hood in this program because of the number of topics that it hits on. It's dynamic, it's fast, and that's why it's good for an audience like this. There might be other simulators that will provide very specific information on sea level rise and so forth, but this one is here for us to use collectively, and it's real time and fast. So that's what we'll be doing. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of background of why on earth would I sit down and want to use this tool. So my husband and I, Andy, who just walked in, moved up to Nevada City in 2019. And then the Jones Fire hit in 2020. And all of a sudden I was faced with a memory that said, hey, there was a climate summit in Brazil and, 1992 or something like that. And then I had remembered reading Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth. And I really became concerned that climate change was happening and I wasn't fully versed on where it was. So I joined the Citizens Climate Lobby and became to know that organization. Through that organization, they sponsor a conference every year, and this was one of the topics at the conference. And I have a systems engineering background, and I did a ton of reading on what the Green New Deal was, carbon capture, carbon fee and dividend, and I thought, oh, well, we'll just do one of those things and climate change will be fixed. But I didn't know, if just one thing was needed. So what I found so compelling about this tool is that it really gives you a sense of the number of different ways this problem needs to be approached to be solved. So En-ROADS has made penetration across the globe. It's been used in 133 countries, and who knows, maybe somebody in Uganda this evening is sitting here just like us and doing a workshop. But what's really important about the global nature of it is climate change is obviously a global problem. So if we're all versed in the same vocabulary, vernacular, it's going to be a lot easier to approach these problems. And over 130 members of Congress have taken the time to use En-ROADS. And that includes John Kerry, who is now the U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate. And he was instrumental in brokering the Paris Accord in 2015. Do any of you remember that? The Paris Accord? Yeah. So that was a big deal. I remember being on the edge of my seat, and it was adopted by 196 countries, and it covers 98% of the anthropogenic emissions. So it's a treaty, and that treaty vows to keep temperature rise to 1.5 degrees C, about 2.6 degrees Fahrenheit, and it calls for emissions reductions of 45% by 2030. And if we'll be talking about some of the legislation that's in place now that resulted as because of our commitment to that treaty. Looking at, this is a graph of carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere over time. And many people will say, we've always had a little bit of fluctuations in our climate. I remember this year or that year, and yeah, it's absolutely true. And the concentrations of CO2 in the atmosphere were cyclical for the last 800,000 years until it wasn't. And then in about 2050, we broke a barrier of 300 parts per million of CO2 in the upper atmosphere, and it just has been going up ever since. And so that's what we're going to try to combat and solve that problem. So CO2 emissions are a result of the Industrial Revolution, which has many different aspects. Started out with the use of coal, and then oil was one of the energy mixes. It produces CO2, gas, and land use changes. You cut down a lot of trees, produces CO2, and also this gray line here is the contributor of some of the cement mixing that goes on, releases some CO2. So I don't know if you drive down the highways in California, but there's a cement barrier that goes down just about every one now. And I drive and think about, oh my gosh, there's some more CO2 emissions coming around. And if you looked at the curve there, you can see that there was an exponential rise in CO2 emissions. And now what we're looking at is a graph of temperature over time. But at this graph and juncture, we're looking from 1850 forward. And we can see that we're looking at a difference or a change. And so we start off with 0, and back in the 1850s, we just kind of hovered around temperature anomaly of 0. Well, now, as we're into the 2020s, we're seeing that our temperature has been rising, and it's continued to rise, and we're up about 1.1 degrees C, or a little bit over 2 in terms of Fahrenheit. Okay, next. So the graph on the picture on the left is probably pretty representative of what the atmosphere looked like back in the 1800s, right? And we really like the fact that there's some CO2 in the upper atmosphere, because as the sun comes in and it radiates off the Earth to heat the planet, then some of that the greenhouse gases trap some of that heat, which is what we need to survive here. And much of it escapes, and this is the desired atmosphere. What's happened since 1950 is that the concentration levels of CO2 and methane and nitrous oxide, which are those greenhouse gases, have accumulated, and they're not as transparent to solar radiation, and in fact, they absorb infrared radiation and therefore cause the planet to warm. And that's the situation we're in now. We're going to get to the interactive part really soon. Okay, so this is a bathtub, and if you can keep this in mind as we're trying to solve the climate change problem this evening, our goal is to remove as much carbon or the emissions as we're putting into the upper atmosphere, because then we don't have a bathtub that's going to overflow. And has anyone heard the term net zero? Net zero. So one of the goals of the Paris Accord is to be net zero by 2050. Okay, that was another part of the treaty. So we want our bathtub to look like this by that point in time, but right now we're overflowing a bit. And this is a global view of temperature in June of 2023, which just occurred. And we all know that in this area we've had an absolutely gorgeous summer. You know, we'd just like to bottle it and pour it every year because it's just been so nice. But what this globe is, or this picture is representing is, and you'll see this a lot in literature, is it shows temperature variation from a baseline. And that baseline in this case are the years when there were fluctuations in temperature between or off of that 0 point where we didn't have temperature rise. And then since that point in time, we can see that the temperature has increased. And so in 2023, what's being shown here is the difference between what this average temperature is and what we were seeing in June. So Canada, what happened in Canada this year? Fire, okay. Yeah, and it looks like Europe was pretty warm. And so, but we were spared, and thankfully so. So what we're going to try and accomplish tonight is we're going to be paying a lot of attention to the temperature change graph. And again, coming back to Paris, we want to keep the temperature rise for below 1.5 degrees C. We don't want it to exceed 2. And so we'll want to bend this curve. If we continue to spew emissions into the atmosphere at the current rate, we'll continue to see temperature rise. And so that's something that we'll want to avoid. And this globe shows that the northern hemisphere is heating up a little bit faster than the southern hemisphere, particularly the Arctic has seen the snowmelt in the Arctic is projected to disappear. There won't be any snow in September. It's projected in 2030 or 2040. So it's, the polar bears are gonna have to find somewhere to go. So what happens if we hit the 2 degree of temperature rise? Well, we've seen some of the effects at 1.1 degree. And so we'll just see a few continued an extrapolation of those events. Coral reefs right now, about 50% of them are bleached. If you've been following around the Great Coral Reef, they're about 50% bleached. And then we're going to have droughts. We would probably experience a longer period of drought. This particular picture or map is of New York City, and that's what it looks like today. And should the temperature rise, we're already committed to a certain amount of sea level rise just because of the temperature increases that we've already seen. And so this isn't going to happen overnight, so don't worry about that. But it's something to be thinking about as we're trying to mitigate this, because we really, you know, love New York, and it's a very vibrant place. So we want to preserve it. So if we're able to keep temperature rise to 2 degrees, then the global sea level rise that's just kind of going to happen, that would occur, would be about 15 feet. But at 4 degrees, it's about double that, so 26 feet. So there will be impacts. It doesn't happen overnight. It could take a couple decades, centuries. It's going to happen differently around different parts of the world, but it's something that we really want to think about in terms of solving this problem. So again, this is just the bull, and then the bull who is just, poor guy. So at this point, we're going to jump in and start working on bending that curve. And so if you could take a look at that handout that I gave you, and take a moment to think about some of the work that you've been doing. So this will look familiar. This is the temperature change graph, and we'll be able to see what's shown here is the baseline, and the trajectory that we're currently on is shown in black. But we have the opportunity to change that. We can invoke policy to combat the amount of emissions that we're seeing in the upper atmosphere. Over on the left are the global primary energy sources. What's shown in brown is coal. So there's a pretty equal split between our usage of coal to produce energy, oil in orange, or red, blue, gas, renewables green. We've got some bioenergy that's in the mix, and just a hair, a little line of nuclear. And of course, there's an opportunity for new energy sources, so that is included in this simulation. So who would like to jump in the water and test this by making an action on something that you currently are thinking would be helpful to combating climate change? Is there anyone? Okay. Rob? Switching to Okay, so let's tackle that. Let's see what we can do. Yes. Okay, so what is it, Rob? Yeah, he wants to use a heat pump, and he's going to power it with solar. Okay, so that brings us to building an energy efficiency and electrification. So we could call it electrification. So what we'll do is we'll go over here, and we will take a look at the total sale of equipment for buildings, okay? And then we'll come over here, and we'll take a look at the share of total buildings in industry. So this would be electronic share. So this is equipment in buildings that's powered by electricity. This graph shows equipment that's powered not just by electricity, but with fossil fuels. So it would have some of your older technologies in there. So what En-ROADS allows you to do is go in, and we can subsidize electrical equipment. We can put in a subsidy for your heat pump, okay? So how much would you like to be subsidized? 80%. 80%. Let's see what happens. Oh, it says, nope, that's too much. But, you know, Uncle Sam can give us, or somebody can give us 50%. So what happens, okay, is that because of that subsidy, all of a sudden the sales of heat pumps and equipment powered by electricity goes up. And so we want to have our contractors ready so that they're able to make these installations. We need to have our supply chains in tow. So what do we want to say that we don't want any equipment powered by gas? No. Okay. So we don't want that. Okay, so we're just going to stay here. And so that shows basically what you can do there.
Well, if your utility energy mix is powered by natural gas or oil or coal, then that's in the blender, so you have to put it in.
Okay, so here we go. All right, so now we're back. We've run into a little hitch here. So we've swapped out our appliance, but we still have a grid that is supplying. Well, in your case, you're going to have your solar panels. You're good, right? So your solar panels are going to take care of you. However, if you don't have solar panels and you want to install one of these, now all of a sudden we've got a grid that is being powered by a mix of energy sources. So we need to address that, because just making that change that we just did of subsidizing electricity appliances for buildings, we'll go back, you can just go back and see what happened when we did that. Did we see any difference in the ultimate temperature change? Just a little bit, right? But why didn't we see more? And this is global, by the way. This means everybody in the world, is going to be on the same boat, right? But it's just a kind of a caveat there. So, what else do we need to do to get our temperature to go down? So we've done a little bit of electrification. We saw that because we've subsidized that it's going to, people are going to buy them, they're going to install them, which is great because we're moving away from fossil fuels, right? If everybody got a heat pump and they're 3 times more efficient, we're going to use less energy. But we need to do something with what's powering our grid. Okay, Carol?
Well, I would focus on carbon pricing.
Okay, let's focus on carbon pricing. So, what price would you choose for carbon? We've got $5 a ton of CO2 right now, but we can change the years to achieve our initial carbon price. So let's just say Canada. Canada, that they have a carbon pricing, right? They just went to it. I think they're at about $17. Does that sound good? All right, so let's try $17. Or
Can we quit subsidizing the oil companies while we're at it?
Hey, Tara, that's not built into the simulator. No, we could. Ooh, $126 a ton does a lot. Well, we better cut that back. We're going to go 17. Okay, so what happened? We can go back and see where we were before. Oh, sorry, that didn't help us out too much because I typed in the wrong thing. Okay, so let's say that we're going to achieve our initial carbon pricing. We're going to do it tomorrow. So we'll say 2 years or something like that. Okay, it didn't really make much of a change. So, but what happens if we look at, I'm going to just make a quick switch over to here. Aha. So the United States doesn't have a price on carbon. Gee, we almost did back in 2009. We were so close, 1 vote short. Is that right, Dave? We were 1 vote short. Sigh. Ellen? Is what free? No, carbon, we don't have, we haven't put a price on carbon. So let me just talk a little bit about the carbon fee and dividend as it's defined by the Citizens Climate Lobby. Sarah?
I was just wondering if don't we need the federal legislation in order to make these changes?
For this particular change, yes, we do. And that's where we come in. We have a voice in this, right? So we need to either from a grassroots level rally or, do our lobbying, which the Citizens Climate Lobby does. They visited every single office of the congressional leaders in June, was that right? And we actually had representatives from Truckee in Lake Tahoe visiting Kevin Kiley, and the staff there. So definitely, we need to lobby and make that happen. So basically what's going on is 23% of the globe countries have, let me put this another way. Carbon pricing covers 23% of global emissions currently. And Brazil, other places are, there's a carbon tax under consideration. China has a scheme. California, we have the carbon cap and trade, right? So that funding has fueled a lot of our forest cleanup in the past few years. So that's very important. But what getting back to the Paris Accords, in order to meet those, they're recommending a carbon price of much higher. Let's go with 50. What effect does that have? It helps to bend that curve quite a bit, right? So the way that carbon fee and dividend works is the carbon is taxed at the point of extraction. So where it's mined or extracted from. And then, so the fee is placed there, and then there's a dividend. And this is the way it's working in Canada right now, is the dividend comes back to the population, anybody who files an income tax, right? And so in Canada right now, I looked at the statistics, they're getting about $1,000 a year from their dividend. So they're actually, it goes right back to the population to cover some of the costs that may be incurred in the transferring of going over from carbon into greener energy sources. So that is one thing that we did that certainly helped us bending this curve. What else can we do? And we can still do a higher carbon price, or we could have it so that it increases every year for 10 years, something like that. What else would be worth trying? Okay, methane and other gases.
Get rid of the cows.
Okay, let's just go ahead and see what effect that has. Methane is a very potent greenhouse gas. The concentration is much less, but it absorbs a lot more heat and keeps the heat in the upper atmosphere longer. And so it is certainly something to get rid of. And if we look at, you say, yeah, the COP26, which was in 2021, actually accomplished methane reductions. 100 countries will reduce their emissions by 30% by 2030. So, and methane reductions are a little bit easier because what you can do is go in and when you extract natural gas, there's a lot of methane leaks. And if you look at a lot of gas pumps out in Texas, they're just leaking methane right now. And so when we look at one of the bills that was passed, that bipartisan infrastructure bill, it allocated funding for capping those oil rigs. And so that should be going on around the country in the United States. So that will be one element that will help us get to. So when we look at the sources of methane, What else do we have? We've got nitrous oxide, and there's a couple other graphs you can look at in terms of greenhouse gas net emissions. You've got some CO2 that's emitted by land, fossil fuels, and then the methane is the one that we've just addressed by taking that action. So that is a key for getting our emissions under control. And okay, Rob?
Just a question about that. Is it the fossil fuel industry that they're primarily concentrating on to get the 30% gain? Or is it agriculture and livestock too?
That's a really good question. Yeah, as Rob is pointing out, methane is caused partly by beef, right? In the United States, we probably consume more beef than other parts of the world. So if we were to cut our consumption of beef, that would probably help. But one of the things that's really important to look at is, let me just try to pull this up. Food percent by animals, but really what I'm looking for is okay, here we go. Use detailed settings. So, yes. I think because we've already moved that slider to the full extent, you don't see the results of this. But one of the other big important parts about the methane is waste of food. And food waste is huge. Right now, it's at about 40%. So if we look at, sorry about that, I don't see that right now. Best practices for, yeah, so anyway, food waste definitely will cut down on methane production from landfills. So that is certainly an area to focus on. Okay. So we've addressed methane. Are there any other areas? Ariel? Okay, so we can look at deforestation or afforestation. So let's address afforestation first. So what's really interesting to look at here is Okay, so let's just say that percent of land used available for afforestation. Let's just say that we wanted to go in and plant a lot more trees. So we do have some, it definitely helps in that arena, but primarily where you can really see a big change would be in the types of forests that are, so what we've done here is we've planted a bunch more trees, okay? And what happens when you do that is that the trees that are more than 100 years old, the trees in the Amazon rainforest, our sequoias, they will not be used as quickly as some of the newer trees that you've planted. So there's definitely an advantage to the afforestation in terms of your overall salvaging of older growth trees. In terms of the emissions reductions, it's not as big of an impact because of the fact that the trees are already tapped out. There's so many emissions that the trees just can't absorb that much more. But if you, and it also takes a while before, it takes about 30 years before you see the fruits of the planting. And also, you can reduce the amount of time it takes to secure the land. That has a minor effect, but certainly afforestation is one mechanism. So
What does that mean, afforestation?
it just means you're going to go plant trees. Yeah. We want to remove some trees. Okay, so here, you're going to reduce your deforestation, right? And what happens? You see quite a big effect on when you reduce your deforestation, right? Okay, so we go back. Yeah. So the old growth forests continue to rise, and so you're helping your biodiversity in those forests. And while it doesn't have a huge impact on the temperature, it definitely impacts the stock of trees globally.
I see that the coal and oil and natural gas are all, fairly high. What about reducing those?
Okay, so let's put a tax on just some of those. So which one would you like to do? Coal? Okay. So let's tax coal, oil.
Yes, please.
Okay, so we'll go there, right? And then natural gas will reduce. And does that have an impact on our temperature? Okay, so all of those actions helps to continue to bend that curve and gets us to almost our goal. Right, so renewable energy really increases during that time frame. Okay, how about, we talked about, what else would we like to do? Energy efficiency in homes. Okay, so let's, and buildings. So we're going to increase our energy efficiency, and when we're doing that, we can, let's just go back to this. Okay, so if we increase our energy efficiency, what impact does that have? So there, we're almost there. It would be nice if this curve would go down, because that way we're not going to run into the problem for the next generation. We'll solve this problem. And if we increase the price of carbon just a bit, okay?
So also transport electrification, we've got kind of down near zero, so that can
Okay, so electrification of transportation, that's a really interesting one. So let's go ahead and did you see, oh gosh, I just read today that Texas is going to charge people to use their freeways that have electric vehicles. I think Elon Musk may come back here.
Should we return to the default first, just to see what that does?
Okay, so we can look at electrification. So we're going to electrify our vehicles, and what does that do? It drops it a bit, and it definitely increases the amount of renewables that we need. Right. So that certainly helped. And then, what else can we do? Okay. Okay, let me just show you. So what is shown here are the Kaya-graphs. It's named after somebody that invented them. But basically, the simulator assumes, while it's doing its calculations, that the global population is going to increase. You know, we're at about 8 billion people in 2020, and it assumes that there's going to be growth in some areas. It also assumes that GDPs want to always increase because the standard of living, there's going to be some third world countries where the standard of living is going to rise. People are still going to want to buy things. But what happens is, because of all the changes we've made, the energy intensity of that GDP has dropped. So we're not using as much carbon. The carbon intensity has really dropped. And so have our CO2 emissions. So that shows the underlying. Now, did somebody say they wanted to decrease the population?
Yes, please. Condoms for everyone.
Okay, there we go.
The only way population is gonna decrease is through
Vasectomy.
A little bit, okay. All right, and let's see, Bill Gates. I read a book about, that written by Bill Gates, not to plug his book, but anyway, he's all into carbon removal technology. And, you know, oddly, I hear a lot of oil companies, you know, when I'm watching sporting events, they talk about carbon capture. Interesting. Interesting. So, at least they're putting it into the ground. Yeah. Yeah, they're capturing it from the air, they're going to put it in the ground, and then they're going to take it up again? Is that their goal?
Their goal, they said their goal is to have zero carbon oil.
Okay. That's, you know, it's an idea, and, you know, that's where some of the investments are going into, yeah, if they can bury that carbon and make it economical, and that's going to be cheaper than some of the other renewables, then that certainly would work. Pardon? Yeah, well, okay, so if we do a bit of carbon capture, there's different methods of carbon capture as well. So aforestation we've already touched on. You can through best practices in agriculture, you can capture carbon that way. And through mineralization, where you use basalt to capture some of the carbon, that works. And then there's direct air capture, which is quite expensive, but it sort of works. Okay, so are you comfortable with that? Okay. So I applaud you. You know, we've helped address the problem. And I think one of the things that is most satisfying when you get to this point is to look at this. So by the actions that we've taken, we have reduced species losing more than 50% of invertebrates. We've saved insects. We've saved a lot of plants. We've saved a ton of mammals. And so we've definitely reached our objectives. Carol.
So I know some people that were very involved with the development of En-ROADS with MIT and so on.
Really?
Yeah, in fact, I was part of a study with the Beta when they were just starting this
Okay.
and giving feedback and so on. But I have friends that are going to lots of like family foundations and, you know, big investment companies and so on, and trying to talk them into, when they do investments, to make sure that they're not investing in coal and oil and so on, to make sure that they are investing in renewables. So it's putting the money into, you know, the investment money into the companies that are developing these products. So that's their big focus now. And not only are they going to governments, which they've done to a tremendous amount of governments throughout the world, now they're attacking where all the money is.
Is right. And that is very powerful. There are 4 major banks, right, that fund most of the fossil fuel development, the pipelines and so forth. And in fact, there was a rally recently on Brunswick here. It was sponsored by Elders for Climate Action, I believe it was, the group. And it was across the country. And people went out to the banks and protested, and in fact moved their money from one bank to the next. And I actually had enough time to do that and switch banks. So it's definitely very powerful. So there are a lot of things you can do as private citizens to help this. JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, and Chase, America. Bunch of, yeah. B of A, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, yeah. Right, and okay, in the back?
So a few years ago, I did this just in my own investment portfolio. I called Edward Jones, and I said, I don't want to invest in any oil anymore. No money for one thing, and nothing. Show me your big portfolio. And he said, we don't have one. I said, then I'm taking my money. So they called me in about a week and said, we have some offerings. Then we rushed to offer up, so they do have green portfolio at Edward Jones Family. And I no longer invest in any oil companies and no more cigarette companies, no more tobacco, except a tiny, I couldn't get out of all of them. I still own a little bit of some British cigarette company. But think about it, if all the people who believe in this put their money where their mouth is and were willing to take, and you guys might invest
Absolutely. We have a lot of power as individuals, as a group, yeah. And you can choose what products you buy. You can see how much transportation it takes to get, some of the products that you purchase. And, that all impacts how much carbon is used in the life cycle of the product. Other questions? Comments? Itera.
Well, it'd be cool to have some kind of, symbol, like don't use this bank and versus the other bank.
Kind of like Dolphin saying too, right? If everybody saw the labels, they
Exactly.
wouldn't buy it.
Because,
Monterey Bay Aquarium approval.
because I know people that, willy-nilly, they just picked that bank because it was closer or something.
Right,
And-
right, without any knowledge.
If they knew, they would freak out that these were funding the pipeline, the Dakota pipeline or something.
Right.
Transfer company or
Same
whatever.
with your investments, nobody knows what's in their mutual funds.
Yeah, that's right.
Jeff Diggs.
Yep, you got to look at closely at those data sheets.
Take your mutual funds and go to as you sow, SOW, stream. Easy, easy.
Kitty?
Most of your groceries that you buy are regulated by 2 or 3 families in the United States. That's why going to places like Farmers Market, you're cutting those people out, and you get fresher, better food.
Right, and it's locally produced. It didn't have to travel to get very far. That's why and you're helping your local, people in your own community. So that's very powerful as well.
And when you think of how much oil and gas go into every tomato or whatever it is, so you can cut that out if you have local
That's right.
farmers market.
Yeah.
Taste your vegetables.
Rob?
Well, I maybe throw a little wrench in the works, but what happens if you say, well, the first world countries should, cut 50% of their emissions because they've been emitting longer and more, and developing countries, that's the problem with the Paris Accord is that they're regulating everybody at the same time, whereas we enjoy these advantages. So, can you model that at all in this?
That's why we have a plan and no action.
No, this does not model that, but there are, I think at the last COP, one of the things they were going to pay the poor or the countries that are suffering the most from climate change. They were setting up funding for them to deal with it, but it certainly is incumbent on the United States to step up when they go to these conferences. And if we're really going to lead, then we need to address that. Definitely the countries. And, yeah, okay. Carol?
Unless we tackle this as fast as possible, when you think about our border security and immigration and all that, there are going to be a lot of countries that are going to need to immigrate because they don't have water, they can't grow anything. They're going to want to go into areas where the climate isn't affecting them as much. And we're going to, it's going to be hell, trying to
Already is.
And that's why it's really important.
a lot worse.
That's why we need to do what we can to solve or to bring emissions down, keep the fossil fuels in the ground, because as we've seen, that really is key. And so we really need to work that. But you're absolutely right. We're going to see a ton of immigration, and we don't have a policy right now. So, okay, Greg?
So Lori, you and I have talked about this before, but let's just max out everything and see what happens.
Okay.
Well, we definitely do need to do the population, right, because they're already saying we're not going lower, we're definitely going to be growing over the next.
But I don't know how you can control a population, tell people that they can't have
No,
kids.
that's what I was
Right. Yeah, it's a very difficult, yeah, it's a tough one definitely to regulate, and do you really want to go there? But we can highly subsidize renewables. Okay, so we're going to go ahead. Now, bioenergy is interesting because bioenergy, there's the Climate Transportation Alliance has got an initiative in North Star in the Tahoe area where they are going to supply enough energy to power all of the operations at North Star using a biomass facility. And it's getting permitted. It's modeled after a similar facility in Vermont, and it makes so much sense for this area because we have so many cuttings from the forest that we're needing to maintain. And so what happens with bioenergy is it's pretty much a neutral proposition. You don't really reduce emissions, and in fact, sometimes you can increase them. But if you do it judiciously and in the right areas, you can have an impact in your local economies. Yeah. So we're continuing to max out everything. Okay, I forgot. Okay, there we go. Carbon pricing. And we're going to natural gas. Yeah. If you noticed, I just read about Southern California on the coasts, I think. They're going to keep 4 natural gas facilities open for emergencies so that when the power shutoffs, should they occur during fire seasons and maybe during the winters, they will be available. But, I think as citizens, it's important to make sure that they're capping anything that's not being used, right? So energy efficiency on transportation. So we get more people riding in buses or just using public transportation, and you've increased the efficiency of moving people. Okay.
What is the new zero carbon
technologies. So that would be, as we could develop new carbon technologies. And the reason why it doesn't have a huge impact in the near term is because of the life cycle. So this shows the length of time products take to mature into markets, right? So here's the colored TV, it came out in the 60s. It went pretty fast. That was a pretty fast one. Now the clothes washer, that took a little bit more time, right? Yeah, so it will take a while, to get the permits, to get it adopted into use by, everyone. So while it's very important to have it going in the background and be funding it, the adoption of it into the market is going to take a while.
Question?
Yes.
Do you have any idea how come the computer made a U-turn there?
Where?
I think that was VCR.
No, the two lines just converged a little bit. I think, right?
Yeah.
Internet.
Oh, got it. It was dishwasher and internet.
Yeah, this is a very interesting graph.
I just want to put in a plug for induction stovepots. My sister built a new house, and she has an induction stovetop, and it's absolutely amazing. So all this hoo-ha about you trying to take away our gas stoves, it's fantastic.
Great. Yeah, I've heard they're really nice. Do people here have them? Yeah. You happy with it?
I love using it. It's wonderful. Like, all the complaints that say that, you're going to phase out gas, and it's like, man, this thing is way better than that.
That's exactly what we're trying to do, right? So you feel good. right?
I put in a plug for e-bikes because, and actually in Berkeley, they were trying to create a whole e-bike incentive. They would take out a whole lot of parking and people would boo and push it down because it's not familiar. Everybody's used to getting in their individual cars, but a lot of the youth are getting on e-bikes and, and it takes up a lot less street, and so you don't have all kinds of things to maintain it.
Right. So we can put some people to work and some jobs by creating, the proper bike lanes and kind of reconfigure our transportation to accommodate a more efficient way to move. Itara?
I have two questions. One is, how does nuclear fit into all this? And the other question I have is how to manage the food waste. I mean, it seems doable, but is something going on about that, or not really? Or what's the way to reduce the methane from food waste?
Well, there's a few ways to do that. One is just by not throwing as much food in the waste bin, right? Obviously, you want to only order what you have, composting. The other novel approach that Mountain View took, and it was in one of their parks, a plaque, was that they had a dump and they covered it up. Some mayor back in the 60s was very ahead of his time and piped the methane back into Mountain View and used it as an energy source. So
I actually went to a presentation just a couple weeks ago by Waste Management. So Waste Management, there is a law in California that we're supposed to be recycling our food waste. And that's been on hold for this area because we're a small municipality. But they are building a facility at the McCourtney Road place. So we are gonna have to compost our food waste, and that can go into a biodigester and create more energy. But what's interesting is right now, our food waste and anything else goes to a landfill in Sparks, Nevada, and that landfill, of course, produces methane. And what happens to the methane? It powers Waste Management's trucks. And so once they take the food waste out of the landfill, then they won't have the methane to power the trucks. It is unintended consequence.
unintended, but you come up with another method to power the trucks, right? Maybe they'll go to electric trucks. Yeah. So it's certainly a step in the right direction. It sounds very encouraging. Yes? I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
I'm Claudia, that's okay. We should have learned this from years ago. I think it's Sweden powers their entire city from garbage. All of their garbage is reused to manufacture
Right.
and power the city.
And
It can be done. Obviously, they built a lot of infrastructure from scratch and had to be dug up and everything, but
yeah, it's amazing what you'll do if you have limited resources as a country, right? And the United States, we haven't really learned that or wanted to do that, but I think there's a lot to be said for it. Yes. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Ben. Oh, yeah.
But so you're still burning it, right, to get the energy out of it, so it's just slightly better, but it's not neutral. Capturing the methane. Right, but to get the energy out of it, aren't they burning the methane? Before they get the energy?
yes, yeah.
That's
Like it's not
it's not being emitted directly into the atmosphere as it would be through the food waste. That's a good question, something to investigate a little bit more fully.
you just have to make sure, I guess, you do the carbon capture.
Right. Yeah. Yes?
How do you get inroads and
Oh, it's really easy.
learn how to use it?
Oh, very easy. You type Climate Interactive in your browser, and then it will say En-ROADS, and you just click on En-ROADS. I can do it. Yeah, so you just, and then you'll hit En-ROADS and explore the simulator, and you're up and running. It's that easy. And in order to, they have an 8-week training course, which you can take, and I took.
Is that online?
It's all online. Yeah, I did it during the pandemic. It's been a while. Yes, Ariel?
Yeah, and thank you for all of this and all the work that you've done. So my question is about, so we did this cool scenario where we did all this stuff and we got where we wanted to be. You've done this a bunch of times. Obviously, a lot of people are doing this research. So have there been some ideal modeling you've put forth? Because there's also, I mean, our analysis didn't take into account feasibility or a cost analysis. So through all the times that this has been done, is there sort of like, hey, this is the modeling that actually is most realistic, feasible, bang for our buck and all of that?
Using coal a little bit, oil a little bit.
But, right.
Model
Sweet
comparison
spot mix
historical.
of all the different factors, or has that been done?
I suspect somebody has done that, and I could look into that, because it's used. I'm certain that at Climate Interactive, they have some, there we go. So this one is,
That'd be a really cool policy brief, like here is after, taking it to the next level. Here is where we could have the most, feasible, cost-effective action at these different levels, like local government, state government, federal government.
Yeah, if you can localize it, because you can't do everything locally.
right. You can just extrapolate from these, right? And, built into this model, for instance, electrification of vehicles. Well, En-ROAD's built in the fact that you've got to have your stations set up, recharging stations, 10 years before you're going to roll out, electric vehicles, right? So you've got to have your planning. But that's a really good question. And I could look into that.
And so they do take into account, like, right now the battery technology and how the carbon footprint and everything for making a car, an electric car, or, just that there's not everything is net neutral.
That's right.
Does the model take into account some of that?
Like all of the, I would think not, but I'm not 100% sure of that because that would get, I don't think so, but could look into it. Kitty?
I just have a question on what you were saying about Texas. You're charging for electric cars, is that in lieu of them not paying taxes on gas?
Yes, because they still drive on roads which have to be fixed.
Right, got it, okay. Thank you.
I mean, other states are doing the same thing, they're just looking at it.
That makes sense. Somebody gonna pay for it.
PG&E is gonna charge you because now you're not paying for your solar.
Well, maybe it will be based on when you go to a charging station, very much like gasoline, you pay based on your usage, right? It seems like the mileage of your car, one would think that, there's going to have to be a mechanism for funding road repairs. Yes?
Did your organization look into education and political willingness, not only in US, but across the universe?
No. The willingness, one would think, would come from what we're facing. Do we want to continue to breathe in smoke from wildfires? Do we want to continue to not be able to go outside because it's too hot? Or not have water because, all the groundwater's depleted? I mean, there are some real problems that living on the planet we need to consider, how we're going to live here sustainably, right? And because it's going to, one way or another, it's going to cost to as we're moving forward. We're either going to make investments into these technologies and, to the changeover, or we can, chase the dog longer and, pay for wildfire repairs or floods and whatnot. Itera?
Well, I just have that question about nuclear. How does that fit in?
Oh, nuclear, I'm sorry. Yeah, so nuclear. So nuclear power plants certainly used a lot in France, and they definitely, let's see, we just did that one. It didn't do a ton, and primarily it's because of the length of time it takes for approvals for nuclear. Also, once your renewables are in place, nuclear is expensive, and so it's just not as cost as competitive, at least in the United States. Yes?
Just for your simulation, can we put the population back where it was? Now peak it up a little bit, I want to see what happens to the graph.
Okay.
Nothing significant.
Well, there is a growth of the population built into the graph, so I'm not sure what that does. It does cause you to use a little bit more of this. Look at the new zero energy, seems to be, well, it's going up a little bit just because the population went up. All of these go up just a little bit. And that went up just a little bit, 1/10 of a degree Fahrenheit. Yes, Dave.
I'd like to point out a couple of things about what I've seen here is that, first of all, it takes a whole lot of different solutions, all combined, in order to get us down to 1.5%.
Throw everything at the wall.
The second thing I noticed is that coal, oil, natural gas, renewables being highly subsidized, this all costs money.
Yes. And so,
The climate solutions are expensive.
Yeah. So is not doing anything.
and so, yeah, and I would say not doing anything is going to be expensive as well.
Probably more expensive.
And it gets more expensive over time, like everything else, right now.
Yeah. And then,
But I think it's just a reality check, that it is expensive. And so politically speaking, when you talk about things that are going to become more expensive, that sort of shows you how, the challenge that we have when we talk to our representatives.
Right. So this is a view graph. Climate-related disasters cost the world $650 billion between 2016 and 2018. And damages associated with global warming could total over $54 trillion by the time we reach 1.5 degrees. So yes, it's going to cost money not to do anything, and it's going to cost money to do something. It is a reality check, and it's part of living on a planet. Sarah?
I think you're preaching to the choir here.
Well put.
And I agree with everything you said. And I think we need actual solutions. I have to use gasoline for my car. I know I'm contributing to the problem, but I don't know what else to do.
Right. So, yeah.
We're dependent upon plastics, which is another side of oil. I mean, on an individual basis, I don't think this is enough. And I don't feel like I've learned enough to fix my problems or as I contribute to the problem.
Right. And so the phase out in California, so let's take your vehicle or my vehicle. I mean, I'm not ready to buy a new car yet, right? I'm not going to go out and buy one. But by the time your car wears out, and you need to invest in a new one, yes?
I don't have the money to do that.
Right. And so the IRA is it was passed a year ago. The policy is being established for California, and the funding will be 7.5K towards the purchase of an electric vehicle.
And doesn't that also pose other issues with the batteries? I mean, you need to have where to charge them, and you don't have enough electric. I mean, I know a friend of mine was able to charge her electrical vehicle at her home.
Right, but we need to have more charging stations around the county, and the county's working on that. There's funding in, California's budget. They just put $54 billion over 6 years into infrastructure and those types of things. Yeah, Ellen? Charging stations. So we need to get them rolled out into, and that's again, making sure that the voices are heard, that this is what's needed. Yeah, you can go to a gas station now. Look how long it took to get gas stations in place. But we need to step up the process, right? And Sarah? Yeah?
What would we do with the gas station? What would we do with the oil company that's funding all this? How do we, I mean,
Yeah, there's a transitional period that's going to need to occur.
The gas stations are gonna become electric car charging stations, and the oil companies are gonna own that and make a profit from it.
Yeah. It's going to be a transition process. Yes?
I don't see any progress right now.
You think for the area,
I've never seen a Tesla on the road.
all charging stations, all over the Target parking lot, actually our Target parking lot. Not where it has them, where all the.
Dan Rayleigh's.
So it depends on where you live, and that's what she's saying, is for more smaller municipalities and further out, we don't see that impact right away, because things aren't tested way out here, they're tested with a.
Right. And so, yeah, but we need to make sure that they are available to us, because in 2035, when you go out to buy a car, you're not going to have the option to buy, a fuel-powered vehicle. Yes, Rob?
Okay, I'll go, you can go. Well, the gentleman over there, he brought up politics, so I'm gonna dive in here.
Okay, we'll take a couple more questions, and then we'll probably have to close it.
The previous administration, who shall not be named, withdrew from the Paris Climate Accord. Who's to say that the next administration is not going to do that too? And so, it's important to vote, but that's a reality, and I don't understand how we can withdraw from a treaty that we signed. And I don't know, it's just a comment. Not
We've
really a
been doing
question.
it our whole lives.
Okay, one more question. Ellen? Okay. Well, Kitty, did you have one more thing?
I was just gonna say that the oil company, I had a couple things, the main thing, oil companies are now investing in electric. A lot of their stuff is they're investing in electrical cars, they're investing in electrical output, so they're moving their oil consumption to the new, different kinds of.
Yeah, they're seeing the writing on the wall. Car manufacturers are switching over. Yeah, it's happening organically, or it's being market-driven in some respects. It's being a combination of legislation and markets and.
It wasn't too long ago that a friend of mine had an electric car, and the company had given the electric car to the employees. Then they pulled them back and they chipped the car. They chopped them up in little pieces.
Oh.
He didn't want to give up his car. It took him a long time for him to get the car away from him. But that's what happened to those electric cars. They chipped them up.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I really appreciate, it was great being here, and thanks for coming out, and it was great discussion.